salary growth, and most significantly, investment rate of return, although that is not being adjusted in this request. In order to test the accuracy of the assumptions that are being used, approximately every 4 years, the pension plan's actuaries conduct what's called an experience study. And that's a look at the plan's actual experience and then compares that to the assumptions that are in effect. Almost always those assumptions need to be slightly adjusted to reflect actual experience. That is what is being requested today. The commission is being asked to approve actuarial assumption changes that have resulted from the experience study. As Senator Rosen mentioned, the plans are 4 MSRS plans. They're the 2 public safety plans, which are the correctional and the state patrol. And then in addition, the legislator plan and the judge's plan. And then for para, there are 2 plans, and those are the local correctional plan and the police and fire plan. So they all have had experience studies recently completed for the period 2015 to 2019. The actuaries then looked at what they found in those plans, compared them to the assumptions that they're currently using, and have come up with a number of changes. Those changes are all listed in summary in the letters that are attached. And so this process now under the statutes requires that the boards of the plans approve the assumption changes as recommended by the actuaries. And then the boards have made the request to the commission to approve those assumption changes so that they can be used in the next actuarial valuations for these plans. So that is what the request is. And if anybody has questions, happy to answer those. Otherwise, we could proceed with the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Linczewski. Are there any questions on the motion? Well, good, thank you. Could I have a motion, please? Representative Murphy.
I move approval of motion LCPR 21-M1.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Thank you, Ms. Linczewski. Thank you, Representative Murphy. And third, we have an informational overview on the paradisability process. Members,
Actually, Senator Rosen,
yes, Ms.
because we are a remote meeting, we do need to do our roll call for membership by roll call.
Ms. Diesel, would you like to take the roll?
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Chair Rosen,
Aye.
Senator Frenz,
Aye.
Senator Howe. Senator Howe, you need to unmute.
Aye.
Thank you. Senator Jasinski,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Senator Rarick, Senator Rarick, Senator Senjum.
Aye.
Representative Berg. Representative Berg, you need to unmute.
Present.
Thank you. Representative Frederick. Representative Frederick, you need to unmute.
Present.
Thank you. Representative Herr.
I just need clarification. Are we doing roll call for being present or are we
present.
voting? Okay,
No.
present.
For attendance.
Present.
Thank you. Representative Murphy.
Present.
Representative Nelson.
Present.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Here.
Representative Rasmussen.
Rasmussen, present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Diesel. Okay, so then back to the review on the disability process. I believe the commission needs to hear about the changes in this para disability application that was implemented about the same time as the riots. And they have seen a tremendous increase in the disability cases at the same time as implementing these changes. And so we have Mr. Doug Anderson, the executive director with Public Employees Retirement Association, and Amy Stringy, the policy coordinator with para. And then we have some testifiers too. Mr. Chris Stewart, Minneapolis police officer, Lindsay Heron, a Minneapolis police officer, and Beth Jordan, the professional clinical counselor. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Anderson and Ms. Stringy. I believe they have a presentation that Ms. Diesel will be sharing.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commission members. I'm Doug Anderson, Executive Director for PARA.
And I'm Amy Stringy, Policy Coordinator for PARA.
Very pleased here tonight to have the opportunity to present and discuss the changes we made to our disability application process. I'll pull up a presentation in a moment. I just have a few introductory comments that I'd like to make. We do want to acknowledge that some of the applicants are struggling during their disability application process. I've read through each of the personal impact statements several times and understand that there is both dissatisfaction with the length of processing time and with the treatment some have experienced from one of the psychiatrists involved with this process. There's information in those statements that I've not heard before. We will also listen carefully tonight to the concerns of the testifiers and the Commission. If there are steps we can take to improve our process, we will do it. We also ask that the Commission consider our challenge as administrators. We want our members to quickly receive the benefits for which they are eligible. However, we must also balance feedback we receive from stakeholders that not all applicants should be eligible for certain benefits. This concern is voiced not only by employers, but also by individual members. Everyone desires the correct outcome for each individual. PARA is tasked with that difficult responsibility of trying to achieve that goal. This requires a process that takes time and skill. We'll speak to you this evening about numbers and definitions and processes. However, we are very mindful of the very real human impact of each of our decisions. We want to get each case right within the parameters of the statutes and the authority we have been granted. We made the change to our process based on staff consensus, based on the need for different expertise, and we did it very deliberatively. The change was reviewed by our board at an open meeting. After the change, we've been as transparent as we can with our stakeholders and have taken every opportunity given to us to help educate the members. The revision was made before a very large surge in applications. We believe it is very understandable that people could connect the processing delays with the change, but it's primarily the surge that's causing the delays. We also understand that the delays are very hard and very frustrating to the applicants. Our staff is aware of that concern and worked hard to mitigate the processing time. We've added staff, we've added overtime, we've added resources. We're doing our best to convey reasonable expectations to the members. We acknowledge there's been bumps in the road, but we're pleased to report that we are now making some progress towards reducing our processing time. This presentation will include information about the disability trends that led to our staff decision. We'll describe how we made our decision and what we changed. We'll provide an overview of the entire disability application process, and we'll conclude with an update of the current status of applications. Now share the screen if I can. Let me just confirm that you can see the start of the presentation. So in this presentation, we will clarify the following 6 items. Number 1, there has been an upward trend in police and fire disabilities that was present before the recent application surge. Number 2, that both the long-term trend and the more recent surge will have a cost impact to the plan. However, we do not expect that to affect long-term plan sustainability. Funding concerns were not a motivating factor for the process change. Number 3, the types of applications we receive have been changing from mostly physical injuries to primarily mental illnesses. Number 4, the process change impacts all the funds and was made only to ensure that fair evaluations are being done for the members by using the most appropriately qualified professionals. Number 5, processing delays are primarily due to a caseload that is 4 to 5 times recent rates and not due to the process change. And finally, We do expect that the processing times will resume to previous levels when the application surge subsides. I will also note that we have Julie Lepick, our general counsel, who may be available for questions depending on what the nature of that question may be. So we'll start with an overview of the plan and talk about the funding's sustainability. This is a very large plan. There's over 25,000 members, over 12,000 actives, over 11,000 retirees. There's also 2,000 members who are not in active status, but not yet receiving a benefit. A lot of contributions coming in, a lot of payments coming out. There's $9 billion in reserves. The plan is moving towards being better funded. When we have more disabilities than expected, that means more members move from active to retiree status. You heard earlier tonight about assumptions. One of the assumptions is how many disabilities are expected to occur in the plan. We currently expect that there would be about 100 disabilities each year. This year, it's going to be much larger. In fact, we're expecting that it may be about 250 more than what was expected. So 250 more members moving from active status to retiree status, more than expected, is about 1% of the population of the plan. So that's just to provide some context that even though there is a surge, if this is a one-time surge, it may not make a significant impact on the overall plan. This is a look at what our membership looks like. On the left-hand side of the screen is the membership status, and I'd call your attention to the bottom left, in which there are 1,477 who are disability retiree status, about 7,800 who are service retiree status. So about 1 out of 6 retirees is classified as a disability retiree. 1 out of 6. And that hasn't changed. It's been that way for a long time. It is starting to trend up a little higher, but disability has always been a component of this plan. On the right-hand side of the screen, we call your attention to the members who are age 50 or over. About 20% of the police and fire active members are over age 50. And that's significant when we talk about disability rates, because the disability rates are higher for the more experienced members. This slide shows the contributions to the plan. The employee contribution rate is 11.8%. The employers contribute 17.7%. There are also contributions coming from the state that will continue coming to this plan until it's fully funded. Those total about $18 million a year. On the top right is where the money goes. This is what the actuaries tell us is needed to fund the benefits. Well, 16.3% is needed to pay for anticipated retirement benefits. About 3.4% are anticipated needed to pay for disability benefits. So again, you can see that roughly 1 in 6 ratio. Just as we have 1 out of 6 retirees are a disability retiree, about 1 out of $6 is needed to help fund that benefit. So if ultimately there are more disability retirees, we would expect there'd be fewer service retirees. It'd be one category, one bucket would need to be bigger, the other would be smaller. Alternatively, if we had more disability benefits, there'd be fewer retirees. So, and that's why a lot of times when something happens that isn't what we expect, if we have more disabled members and retirees, it changes the cost for that member, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a significant cost increase. It may or may not. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it will depend a little bit on age and service. And at the bottom right, you can see that there's a significant amount of the contribution needed above and beyond what's currently going to fund future benefits. And that's going to help improve the funding security and move the plan towards full funding status, which is what you can see here. This is our funding ratio. So this is something you've seen before. We looked at it last week. The plan is currently about 88% funded, at least it was last June 30th. It's on a path to be fully funded around the year 2037, again, based on the last valuation. A certain amount of disability rates are already built into that projection. Now, if we see disabilities greater than expected, which is happening during this surge of applications, that may decrease the rate of funding improvement, but not so much so that it won't improve. So the plan is sustainable. It can withstand a disability surge, but it will slow the growth or slow the time it takes to be fully funded, which means it'll extend the time that the state will need to make $18 million a year contributions. And it'll delay the potential for active members or employers to pay lower contributions. And it may delay the potential for retirees to get higher cost of living adjustments. So we wanted to cover this because we want to make it very clear that plan sustainability was not a motivating factor to look at our process change. We get this question a lot from members. The question we get is, are increasing disability rates harming the funding stability of the plan? The answer is no. Have they been a motivating factor for a change in the process? The answer is no. The next segment is going to be a discussion about the trends that we, staff, looked at starting several years ago to try to identify what is happening with disability increases and try to turn anecdotal evidence into real data that we can use to build decisions on. So we look back at just some history, and I've added 2020 in here, but at the time when we were doing analysis, we only had through the year 2019. And it just shows the annual service retirements by year and the annual disability approvals by year. And it does demonstrate that there is a growing trend in disability approvals. The disability rates are increasing faster than the service retirements. So confirmed what we believe to be happening, and we can see the evidence of that. Now, it was a gradual increasing trend for many years, but it very much accelerated in recent years. And again, when we were looking at our process, we were looking at just 2017, 2018, 2019, but this shows the approvals over that time and also adding in 2020. Now, the 2020 approvals really may be a little deceptively low because a lot of the applications came in late in the year. So it doesn't fully demonstrate the surge of activity because here we're just demonstrating the approvals that occurred during the course of a calendar year. Looking back a little further and looking at the time period from 2015 to 2020, the approval rate for disability applications was over 97%. And here you can see back in 2017, we're getting about 5 applications and about 5 approvals a month. By 2020, it was well over 10 a month. Currently, we're receiving about 40 a month. And we'll show that in a moment. Digging deeper into the data to see what we can learn, we looked at the data to see if we could answer the question about where are the disability trends coming from. So we broke it into 3 age groups: age 50 to 55, 45 to 50, and under 45. And what is the trend in disability rates in those age groups over the last decade? And it's increasing for every age group. It's increasing at a faster rate for the more experienced members. So this is the annualized rate of disability. In other words, if you look at 1% here would translate to 1 out of every 100 active members becoming disabled in that year. And this is a different way of looking at how are the disabilities shown by age group and by service. So each dot represents a member that was a disability approval. This is in fiscal year 19. And you can see it's not easy to classify exactly where they're coming from, but you can see that there's more at the more experienced levels. And we have them by zone here. And the zones help tell a bit of the story. So zone 1 are members under 55 and 20. If a duty disability occurs for a member in zone 1, their benefit will be increased, so it's the same as if they had 20 years of service. And they would start their benefit immediately, and it would be tax-free until age 55. So when there are disabilities in this zone, it can add a fairly significant cost to the plan. In zone 2, a disability benefit is based on their actual service, since it's over 20 years. So the benefit is the same as if they retire, however, they can commence it immediately without reduction. Zone 3 are members who are over 55 with over 20 years of service. And because they have met retirement eligibility, they cannot apply for a para-duty disability. Their benefit is the same as a regular retirement benefit. However, they may apply for 299A healthcare insurance to be paid by their employer. And finally, zone 4 has fewer members. These are members who are over age 55 with less than 20 years of service. These members too, if they're disabled, they would receive a benefit that's based on a minimum of 20 years of service. And currently it would be not taxed for a period of up to 5 years. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Strange to talk about the disability benefits.
I'm going to just give a brief recap of the disability benefits focusing on duty disability and regular disability. The para police and fire plan has 4 types of disability: duty disability, regular disability, and then there is duty total and permanent disability and regular total and permanent disability. But again, for the purposes of this presentation, I'll just walk through duty disability and regular disability. In order for a member to be eligible for a disability benefit, the member must have a disabling condition that is assumed to last at least 12 months and prevent that member from the occupations of performing the occupations of the job. So essentially for the PNF plan, the member can no longer be a police officer or a firefighter. For a duty disability benefit, the member is eligible on the first day of the job, and the injury must occur on the job and be directly attributable to inherent dangers of the job. The member is given a minimum of a 20-year service benefit, which is equivalent to 60% of their average salary. If they do have years of service beyond 20 years, it is 3% for each additional year of service. For most, that minimum benefit is non-taxable until normal retirement age, at which it converts to a taxable retirement benefit. It's important to note that for a duty disability benefit, they may have gainful employment outside of the disability benefit. And also members receive continued health insurance paid for by the employer due to the duty determination, and that is according to 299A.465. For a regular disability benefit, in order to be eligible, the member must have 1 year of service. The injury or disability must not have occurred on the job, or if it did occur on the job, it's not attributable to inherent dangers of the job. The member is awarded a maximum of a 15-year service benefit, which is roughly 40% of average salary, and is fully taxable. Again, for most members, this converts to retirement benefit at normal retirement age. And then I'm going to turn it back to Doug.
Thank you. So this is demonstrating the type of disability application that we received and the approvals over the last couple of years. Left-hand side of the screen is the fire personnel. Right-hand side are police personnel. And about 80% of the plan is our police personnel, 20% fire. So we would kind of expect that if all rates were equal, you'd see 4 times the activity on the police member side. But we have it broken down here between the duty related, PTSD duty related versus duty related not PTSD, which still may include a mental health illness, and then other or regular disability cases. The trend that's very much stronger and clearer is with the police members, a very significant rise in PTSD-related approvals. Again, these are based on calendar year information. So getting to the change that was made and putting it really into the simplest terms that we can, Ms. Stringy will talk about the full process, but there's really one key change that was made, and that was when the application comes to PARA and comes to our third-party administrator. Under the previous process, the review of the files, the casework, the peer review was done by a general physician, and now it's done by a psychiatrist. And of course, this is if it's a mental health application. So this is attempting to get the right professional to do the evaluation. So the basis for the staff decision was based on the data that we saw. In 2018, about 42% of the applications were mental health related. A year later, 2019, it was over 70% are mental health related. We didn't know it at that time, at the time we made this decision, but that trend would continue. And I believe it's over 85% of the cases that we've seen so far in 2021 are mental health related. So definite change from physical injuries to mental health illnesses. There was a collaborative effort by PARA staff and a very deliberate process. This was thought through over a period of time and looking at the data, trying to understand what's the best approach for us to best do our job. Once staff made the decision about this change, we shared the information with the board at a public meeting. Our board member does include members of the public safety community. 3 of the board members have that experience. That was done in August of 2020. And then from there, we moved into communicating the change and implementing the new process.
I'm going to now talk through the process. It's important to note that for the most part, the PARA's disability application process applies to all 3 funds in the same manner. There are some small differences for police and fire members, which I will note as I talk. So a member applies for a disability benefit with PARA, and for the PNF plan, most use attorneys. However, an attorney is not necessary to apply for a PARA disability benefit. Along with the disability application, members must submit 2 medical reports. Statute requires that one of these medical reports is completed by a licensed medical doctor. Once PARA receives an application, PARA, for purposes of the police and fire plan, contacts the employer via a letter of notification. That letter includes 2 forms that the employer is required to fill out. One is called a unit certification, and this is basic payroll information. The second is a required employer information form, which provides more context to the situation. The employer also submits to PARA a pre-employment physical, a position description, and any first reports of injury. Once PARA has received the application, PARA then submits that application to our consulting disability case manager. Next slide, Doug. Thanks. Statute allows us to work with a third party to review disability applications, as well as the use of independent medical and psychiatric evaluations to evaluate these applications. This process is the same for all applications that PARA receives. The application is submitted to our third party, and our third party provides an initial review of that application by a clinical nurse. This initial review is primarily to make sure that there is sufficient information in the complete application. So at this point in time, there may be correspondence between the member and the clinical nurse. Once the application is deemed complete, depending on the nature of the disability, is who initially then reviews that application. If it's a physical disability, it is reviewed by a general physician. If it is a psychiatric or a psychological disability, it is reviewed by the board certified psychiatrist. It's important to note that this review is looking at the same pieces of information or looking at the application to see if the application contains the information that we need to determine eligibility. Again, that eligibility requirement for a disability benefit is that the member has a disabling diagnosis that is assumed to last a period of not less than 12 months and prevent that member from performing the duties of the occupation. If there is not sufficient information to evaluate those eligibility requirements, then that general physician or the board certified psychiatrist is able to request independent testing. For a physical disability, that is going to look like a independent medical evaluation. For a psychiatric or psychological disability, that is going to be a independent psychiatric evaluation and testing. The testing includes the MMPI-3 and the Million Clinical Multi-Axle Inventory 4, and a independent psychological evaluation, which is conducted by a different board certified psychiatrist than the one that has asked for the further information. Once the testing and the evaluation is complete, then our third party puts together a recommendation to PARA and submits that to us. I should note, for the purposes of our conversation today, that that initial review by the board certified psychiatrist, approximately currently 48% of the applications are processed in that review without any further testing or evaluations conducted. Next slide, Doug. Once PARA receives the recommendation from our third party, we review that recommendation and also then, if necessary, apply a duty determination test. So at that point, we are looking at whether or not the injury or disability occurred on the job and in the inherent dangers of the job. Once PARA has made our determination, we inform the members of that determination. And I will talk about if a member is approved and also if a member is denied. If a member is approved for a disability benefit, a duty disability benefit, then that member receives continued health care paid for by the employer. And at this point, the employer may contest or may appeal that 299A determination. That does not impact the benefit that PARA has awarded the member. It just impacts the continued health care insurance. Then the benefit is also paid retroactively back to the day after the last day paid. And that is the approval process, or what happens after a member is approved. If a member is denied, that member is denied because they did not meet the statutory eligibility requirements. A member may appeal this determination to our Board of Trustees. If one thing I will also note on approval is that if a member is approved, there is a disability continuation process. That member has to submit medical records to PARA for it occurs for once every 5 years, or sorry, let me try that again, members. Every year for the first 5 years, the member provides medical records to PARA, and we review those. And then after that, it's every 3 years.
Ms. Stringy, how long does the appeal process take?
It depends. The member has 60 days to appeal the staff decision, and then PARA typically replies relatively quickly at that point, and then there's another 60 days for the member to appeal that decision before it goes to the board. There's also potential of a fact-finding conference with the Office of Administrative Hearings, so that factors into it. So it depends on how quickly the member may appeal and how, if it does go to that fact-finding conference, when that member, how quickly that process goes.
Thank you. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Stringy, so once the recommendation's been given and PRA reviews that, you make your determination. How many of that percentages stick with the recommendation versus PR making a different recommendation or a different determination?
Madam Chair, I'd have to look at our records for that. I don't have that information offhand. But when para does receive the recommendation from our third party, we are reviewing it, and we do weigh all the evidence when we do make a determination. I can get you that information if you are interested.
Madam Chair,
Senator Jasinski.
just to follow up, so has there been any that have been not taken that recommendation and done differently? So just has there been one?
I can't say for certain, Senator. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Madam Chair? Madam Chair?
Senator Prince.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Stringy. I had a question about the independent medical examinations. Can you tell the committee a little bit more about how those doctors might be chosen?
So, Madam Chair,
Stringy.
Madam Chair, those independent psychiatrists are through our third party. Our third party has reviewed them and has brought them on into the process.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Senator Prince.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, and thanks, Ms. Stringy. I guess what I'm driving at is, are the independent medical examiners chosen in some kind of balanced fashion, or are they selected with any slant towards the employer or employee? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Stringy.
Thank you, Senator Prince.
Madam Chair, they are selected with balance in mind. We do not want any slant in our psychiatrists, because that's not going to provide the best evaluation, and our intent is to provide the best evaluation.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. E, is there more?
I'm passing it off to Doug now.
Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two final slides to end. This is just showing the effect of the surge. If we look at month over month applications that we're receiving, I noted back in 2017, we would see about 5 a month. Prior to mid-July 2019, we'd rarely see more than 10 a month. Lately, we've been seeing about 40 a month. Our final slide is really an update of where we stand on the caseload. This shows on the left-hand side the applications that we're receiving by month. What's in green are those that have been approved. In orange is the two that have been denied through February 22nd. And then the others are in process. Oftentimes we get asked, well, what's the average time to complete an application review? That's difficult to say because each application is very different. Some are easier to review, some are more difficult. On the top right is showing the progress that's made and the gap that when we had the change in the process and when the surge of applications started, it did challenge our processing time. So the amount of applications that were received was growing steadily, growing at a rapid rate. We needed to catch up on our completion rate. And what you can see in February is the start of gaining on this process. What will be really helpful is if the number of applications start to subside. If that happens, we'll continue to catch up at a greater rate. We do feel like we have turned a corner to start shortening the processing time. Return that back to the standards that we had prior to this surge. And on the bottom right is the approval percentage, where we stand on applications received since July 1st. So 97% is the current rate of approvals. That, of course, will change as we move along in some direction. It could get lower, it could get higher, we don't know. We caution against making any assumption about what and how that might change. Currently, we're not aware that the 4 cases that have been denied have started the appeal process, they may. And so potentially, the appeal could be turn an application from a denial to an approval. That's potential. So where we're at is 97% on the decisions that have been made to date on applications that have come in since July 1st.
Thank you. We have a question, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess the question I have, would it be a fair statement to say that the PTSD or mental health determinations are more difficult to do than the physical injury disability applications? Would it be more difficult for to determine those, and maybe they'll say it would take longer?
Mr. Anderson?
Madam Chair, Representative Nelson, yes, that would be fair to say.
Thank you.
And Senator Howe?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, is there, I know that in different processes, attorneys are limited on what that they can receive on certain benefits. Is there any limitation on this of what attorneys can make when they represent a client through this process?
Mr. Anderson?
I'm going to ask if Ms. Strange, are you?
Madam Chair, we're not aware that there are any limitations on what an attorney can charge for this. Again, as I said in our presentation, that an attorney is not required to go through the disability process. But most use an attorney.
Any further questions on this page, slide? Mr. Anderson?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just in closing, I'd like to say that I know there's a lot of focus on the approval rate. Some stakeholders will think that our approval rate is too high. Some will think it's too low. We don't have a right number. That's not, the goal is not to hit a certain target on the approval rate. Our goal is to have a fair assessment for every single member and do the best we can with what we have. So, we're trying to get the right decision in a reasonable time, using the right resources that we have, working within the statutes and within our authority. We do appreciate the discussion and the comments tonight, and we will listen, and we're really welcome to anything that will help us do our work better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I appreciate that very much. I do have one more question before we turn to the testifiers. In the appeal process, is that appeal paid for by the employee? Or the employer? I mean, it's out of the pocket. It's out of pocket. They have to hire a lawyer to appeal it. Tell me the process. I guess I'm ignorant here.
Madam Chair, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the member may choose to use an attorney and they would pay that cost, but then para would pay, we're represented by our general counsel. And so we have that time effort that is.
And if it was reversed and approved, would that expense out of pocket from the member be reimbursed?
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of a mechanism for that, but I can check and make sure, and we can get back to you on that.
Okay, just wondering. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, good. I just want to remind everyone that there is in your packet, there are some other testimony from some Minneapolis police officers that are anonymous, that they did write their story out, so you can read that. And there is no formal action tonight. This is just an informational hearing that I think is very, very important. So I do appreciate your indulgence. With that, we are going to turn to Mr. Chris Stewart. Welcome, Ms. Stewart, to the Pension Commission. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome, Ms. Stewart. Go ahead, please, with your testimony.
Good evening, Senators, Para Board of Directors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Stewart. I admit this is never a place I thought I'd be. nor is it a place I want to be. I am not a politician. I am a husband, a father, a son, a brother, a friend, and a Minneapolis police officer. Or at least I was. This is a hard statement for me to make. You see, I'm not quite sure what I am anymore. Excuse me.
It's okay. Take your time.
I started my employment with Minneapolis in November 2006. My mom tells me from a very young age, she knew I was going to be a cop. I love my job. Like it is for so many of us, it became part of our identity. It was my dream. It's the reason I have the life I have today. It's the reason I have my wife. And it's the reason why we're awaiting the arrival of our second child. It's how I met my best friends, but unfortunately, it's also the reason I am not okay today. Throughout the majority of my career with Minneapolis, I was assigned to the 4th Precinct in North Minneapolis. I was a member of a SWAT team, of the weapons unit, and of the FBI Safe Streets program. In the last months of my career, I was assigned to a supervisory role in the 2nd Precinct. I saw the worst of humanity, but I also saw those who were dedicated to helping the good. I was fortunate enough to work with men and women who became my brothers and sisters. Together we were forced to answer numerous calls of homicides, suicides, active shooters, motor vehicle accidents, drug overdoses, domestic abuse, child abuse, animal abuse, assaults, and anything and everything in between. Taking these calls day in and day out takes a toll on all of us. I became angry, irritable, hypervigilant, depressed, isolated, amongst thousands of other things. I was told this is how cops are. As a result of my career with Minneapolis, 3 independent doctors and a psychologist have diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder. Each has told me I cannot simultaneously get better while continuing my career. I was at a fork in the road and had no choice and had to make a choice between my career and my life. I chose my life, and now I'm being second guessed and put through an invasive and insufficient process. I want to first lay out my time frame as how long this horrible and unacceptable process took with para and MMRO, and then I'll come back and talk about my supposedly independent process with Dr. Gratzer and the horrific treatment I received from him. I turned in my disability application August 17th, 2020. Approximately 13 weeks later, I was notified that para selected me for an independent psychological examination, or an IPE, the week of November 16th. Later, I found out that the psychiatrist from MMRO who had reviewed my disability application agreed that I was diagnosed correctly with PTSD, and that his only concern was that if the PTSD would last greater than 1 year. That was October 29th. It took para approximately 3 weeks to notify me that I needed to do an IPE as part of my medical application process. It then took para another 4 weeks after that to notify me when my IPE was going to be. They finally notified me on December 17th that my IPE was scheduled for Saturday, December 19th. It was so kind of them to give me a 2-day heads up during the holidays as to when my IPE was going to be. And it's a good thing they notified my attorney when this was going to be, because I didn't get a notice in the mail regarding my IPE until December 23rd, 4 days after my IPE. All told, it took para and MMRO 7 weeks to set up an IPE, which took place 124 days from the time I turned in my para application. After my IPE, it took para until it took MMRO until February 6th to complete my report and get back to para. That's 52 days from the time I had my IPE with Dr. Gratzer. I finally heard back from para regarding my application on February 9th, and that was through email. It took para in total 186 days to make a determination on my application. That's over half a year and is completely unacceptable. On average, it takes para 7 to 12 weeks to complete an application. My application took 2 to 3 times longer than average, and there's no way para can claim that mine took that much longer than normal due to the increased amount of applications being filed, because mine was literally one of the first few filed post-riot. Now let me talk about my IPE with Dr. Gratzer and how I was treated by him, para, and MMRO. During my 50-minute long IPE on December 19th with Dr. Gratzer, he treated me with such disrespect and unprofessionalism that I felt like I was re-victimized and re-traumatized. The first 30 minutes of the evaluation was gathering background information and reading over a trauma list I prepared. Despite the fact that the list was in front of him, he repeatedly got many details wrong. He barely looked at me. He cut me off several times mid-sentence and told me that he did not need to hear about what symptoms I was currently having or experiencing in regards to the PTSD that I suffered during my 14 plus years as a police officer for the city of Minneapolis. He also cut me off mid-sentence several times when I tried correcting him on inaccurate or assumptive statements that he was making in regards to why I was unable to go back to work or the reason that I left work in the first place. Rather than trying to gain a sense of who I am or why I was in front of him, he read through this list of symptoms and stated, yes, you have this, or no, you don't. I was never given a chance to elaborate, and when I tried, he would interrupt me and tell me what I had to say was not important. Dr. Gratzer was more occupied about the trip he was taking to Jamaica the following week than he was about my evaluation and what I had to say. He made a point to bring up this trip several times during my evaluation. After leaving the office, I truly believe that there was no way he could have conducted a fair and impartial evaluation in the very short period of time I spent with him, and his refusal to let me talk and express myself. I was disgusted with his demeanor towards me and his biased mannerisms and he expressed towards me and my profession. I had an opportunity to express this exact same frustration and belief regarding my IPE in a Zoom meeting with 2 senators earlier this year. After almost 2 months, I received a copy of Dr. Gratzer's IPE report. I was absolutely appalled with what I read. His evaluation was full of lies, assumptive statements, and gross misrepresentations of what I said during the evaluation. His report was a sheer contradiction of what the 4 previous doctors said and what I had said during my evaluation. The most obvious inaccuracy in his statement that he made was about how I am not currently taking any medication to deal with my anxiety. Dr. Gratzer acknowledges that I am prescribed Atarax, which is prescribed to me by my primary care doctor, Dr. Nugent Tran, but fails to acknowledge or even know that this is an anxiety medication, even with his unlimited time and ability to do research on this medication. Dr. Gratzer also failed to mention in his report that I told him about needing to take this medication every night, sometimes 2 to 3 tablets a night just to fall asleep. If I were to write a report full of lies and inaccuracies in my profession, I would immediately be fired. If I were to testify to a report like this, I'd be charged with perjury. After reading the report by Dr. Gratzer, it has caused my symptoms of PTSD to tailspin out of control. I am quick to anger. I think very negatively of most people and of society. My nightmares have increased. My ability to get a full night of sleep is non-existent. The worst symptom of them all that has increased drastically is my depression. For the first time in my life, I actually talked about and contemplated suicide. The harm that Dr. Gratzer, Para, and MMRO has done to me is irreversible at this time and may never be able to be repaired. My blood pressure is up nearly 50 points, and now I have suicidal thoughts and plans. This process is literally killing me. Recently, I was made aware of a former officer going through this process 2 years ago who ended up killing himself because of the scrutiny placed on him. Unfortunately, that won't be the end. The harm Para is causing will result in someone else taking their life. How many more have to die before our voices are heard? If Para truly cared about their members, they would start holding police departments, entities, and insurers responsible for the treatment of their employees and mandating that every law enforcement and fire agency in the state has some kind of meaningful program to address mental health, specifically PTSD. The sole reason most of us are suffering from PTSD is due to our work-related experience and the fact that we have been shamed into hiding it from others. It should be the responsibility of our employers to provide adequate and meaningful treatment to their employees to help them cope with PTSD and help reduce the rising number of first responders leaving their profession. If this issue is not addressed, you will continue to see the rise of disability claims through Para. In December of 2017, an article from American Public Media was published about Minneapolis's pre-employment psychological testing generally. A large portion of that article was dedicated to Dr. Gratzer's involvement with Minneapolis. According to the article, Dr. Gratzer started conducting such examinations for Minneapolis in 2012. Minneapolis chose Gratzer because he was part of a network of physicians contracted to process workers' compensation claims. According to the article, Dr. Gratzer has no experience in the specialized field of law enforcement psychology. The examinations were conducted in the same manner in which mine was. A Dr. Logel, administered the testing portion while Dr. Gratzer completed the clinical interview. In the article, the executive director of the Minnesota Peace Officer Standards and Training Board stated Minneapolis appeared to have violated post rules that a licensed psychologist, not a psychiatrist, makes a fitness for duty determination. That rule is still in place today. During this entire process, Para refused to adequately answer any of my questions about the current status of my application or when was the next step of my process going to be. Instead, they told me to call MMRO. MMRO told me that they weren't at liberty to talk about my application that contained my medical records, my application that determined whether I would have health insurance so I could continue therapy, my application that my life clearly depends on. I couldn't get a straight answer, but MMRO disrespectfully told me to contact my attorney. Knowing my attorney had reached out to MMRO several times, I asked this lady from MMRO if they would actually respond to my attorney. This lady told me that she could not discuss anything with me and that I needed to contact my attorney. We continued this frustrating loop. It was clear that MMRO didn't care about me, my application, or what I was going through. I've never been so disrespected in my life as I was while trying to get answers from MMRO. The next day when I called Para and asked for an update on my application, they again told me to call MMRO. When I told Para what MMRO had said, Para had no response. It was extremely clear to me that Para was no longer in charge of my application. As I sit here today, it's been over 8 months since I gave up my career. My treating psychologist told me she would not see me fit for duty. I did not choose to go down this path. I had no other choice. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life, to admit that I wasn't doing okay and that I needed help. I did what I thought was right for my safety, for my family's well-being, and for the safety of my colleagues at the MPD, as well as the public. This process makes me feel like nobody believes me. After what I've gone through, being second guessed the whole time. If another officer asked me what to do if they're having trouble, I'd tell them to hide it. Don't seek help, suffer through it. You won't be believed, your life will be ruined. This job will take everything from you. It won't let you leave it, no matter how hard you try. All I wanted was help. Instead, I got para, MMRO, and Dr. Gratzer. As I've talked to other officers about my experience, many have stated that they wanted their voices to be heard, but they're afraid of the backlash from para. None of us can afford that backlash. It is for this reason I asked para and the Senate to open up a fact-finding investigation into Dr. Gratzer's medical license so no one else has to be re-victimized or re-traumatized. I'm also asking the Senate to open up an investigation into para and their illegal and unethical behavior, and immediately hold all those individuals accountable for their actions up to and including termination, so no one else has to be treated the way I was ever again. I am also demanding that para immediately stops using Dr. Gratzer and that Dr. Gratzer has no further role in any para process. Thank you again for your time and for letting my voice be heard. I need help. I am begging for help. Please help.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And I know this is extremely difficult, very personal, very heart-wrenching, and I appreciate you coming in and telling us what has happened here. Are there any questions for Mr. Stewart? Senator Jasinski, do you have anything that you like to comment?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, this was brought to my attention. We met with Mr. Stewart earlier this summer, and I just hope for all our members on this commission, it's eye-opening to listen to Mr. Stewart's story. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you for bringing it to our attentions. And with that, we will go to Miss Lindsay Heron, Minneapolis Police Officer 2. Welcome, Miss Heron.
Hi, Madam Chair.
Go ahead. When you're ready. Don't worry.
I'll try my best, but it's hard to follow. Officer Stewart. Just some background about me. I've been in law enforcement for 22 years almost. And I've seen anything that you can imagine. The worst was obviously for me in May. Going back a little bit, I went back to school to get promoted so that I could continue to. I was a sergeant. I wanted to become a lieutenant. I wanted to be promotable. I wanted to have a 4-year degree. I wanted to be the most professional person I could. And I graduated with a 4-year degree in 2019, and I got promoted to lieutenant, where I was sent to the 3rd precinct. And I, like Officer Stewart, enjoy and have always loved law enforcement. Most officers get into law enforcement because we want to help people. There's right and there's wrong, and we uphold the law, and we help people that can't help themselves. They call us when they're in crisis. After the riots, during the riots, I was the incident commander for the first 3 days until our precinct was overtaken. That long, drawn out 8-day for me process of no sleep, no breaks, supervising people, officers telling stories about how they think that we're going to die inside this precinct, and me trying to be the rock for them. They're looking to me to see how is this going to play out. And so you stuff all those emotions down and you put on your happy face, and you confidently tell them that we're going to get through this. And you do that over and over and over. Problem is, I didn't know if we were going to confidently make it through that process when thousands of people wanted us dead inside that precinct. So needless to say, that operational period was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my career. And it just highlighted all of the other things that I've seen, like Officer Stewart referenced. We just put them to the side. We don't need help. We are the helper. We do not need help. We are the helper. And you continue on through your career like that. In June, I was still going to work and I couldn't walk into the building without someone saying, "How are you?" And unfortunately, this was my reaction. This is not, you can't be a professional lieutenant when you can't hold it together. So I sought the help that I needed and I started going to therapy, and I saw two of my doctors, and I was prescribed some medication to help with some of the symptoms, and I was going to therapy once a week. I was initially diagnosed with acute stress, and then I was diagnosed with PTSD. Knowing that I could not continue to go to work and get better and heal myself and be the mom and the wife that I needed to be while still experiencing law enforcement, I decided to take a leave of absence. So I stopped working on July 6th. It's been 231 days since I stopped working. I am still in this para process, trying to see where this is going to land. I'm just going to look over my notes for a second for days. Just so you guys know, this is the medical record of how much is submitted on me. This is my therapist, my doctors, everyone recommending that I should not be in law enforcement. It's all I've done since I've been 22 years old is law enforcement. So being in law enforcement is not just a job, it's a calling. You run to danger where others will not, and you don't just shut that off. So in order to continue to help myself, I knew I needed to stop working and work on myself and go to therapy and get through some of these symptoms that were prohibiting me from being social and going out into public, going grocery shopping, going around people. Everyone had a mask on. All I could see is rioters over and over again. Everyone's wearing a mask. So I submitted my application to para, knowing that I was not going to be able to continue in law enforcement. I knew that the process was going to take a little bit of time. And the hardest part was right when I thought that the timeline was I was going to get an answer, I got a letter. Let me back up a little bit. So when I first put in my application on October 14th, on November 26th, I received a letter that said that para, along with the MMRO, Managed Medical Review Organization, will determine your eligibility for para. And then you will be notified if you are approved or denied. So instead of getting approved or denied, I got a phone call from my attorney stating that I would be going through an IPE, an independent psychological evaluation. So that all of that progress that I had made for the past 6 months was basically halted in its tracks. My anxiety was up. I couldn't sleep anymore. I knew this was coming up. I knew I had to take another personality test. I knew that I had to sit through another hour and a half examination with a different doctor. After all of my records have been submitted to para, this was now starting over. It felt like it was starting over. And it also felt like I was questioned as to why. So all of this stuff doesn't mean anything. Now we're starting over fresh, independent. I also had the same doctor that Officer Stewart did, Dr. Gratzer. And I am just gonna go over a little bit about his treatment with me. So just beginning to end, I sat down 6 feet away so we could take masks off. He then took a personal phone call on his cell phone. So he just allowed me to wait while he talked on the phone for a little bit. And then we talked about where I worked, which was the 3rd precinct, which is obviously non-existent right now. He got on his phone and Googled the restaurants that he likes in 3rd precinct and asked me if I had eaten at any of them. Then he asked me what I thought about Officer Chauvin. I was completely taken aback by the line of questioning, being that I was there for a psychological evaluation about myself and who I am. He then stopped himself and said, no, I shouldn't ask you that, but maybe actually I should. Yeah. So what did you think was going on with him? And I responded, I wasn't there and it's not for me to describe to you. He then asked me, knowing I was in the precinct, how it was burned. How can they burn down a building like that? So I had to explain to him the types of things that were thrown at us, what accelerant was. He didn't understand or wanted to know the gory details of me being inside our precinct as people were trying to hurt, kill, injure, burn down the precinct. He read through some of my critical incident list. I had traumatic incidents listed out. And instead of just listening to me talk about them, he instead gave his opinions on my critical incidents, personal opinions about how he thought about them or what I should have done 15 years ago in order to not have it be affecting me today. Well, I can't change history. So he proceeded to do this for almost every single one of my incidents. At one point, he looked through my file and found my therapist and decided to Google her again on his phone and show me a picture, and then offered his opinion about her credentialing, basically discrediting who she is or what her credentials were for diagnosing me. I mean, the whole entire experience beginning to end was re-traumatizing. I left there and I was shaking. I could barely function. I had to get into the elevator. I couldn't barely compose myself, find my car, sit there and just shake and cry until I could figure out how I'm going to get home. I took about a week and then I saw my therapist and explained to her how this went. And it was tough because she said that it didn't seem like he had any training in trauma or how to not re-traumatize somebody through some of these situations. I've been seeing her, like I said, weekly or bi-weekly this entire time, getting better, better, better. And then I see him for an hour and 10 minutes and walk out and I have reversed everything and all of my symptoms are back. Then I wait for results and I don't even know if I want to see these results. I'm not sure I want to read what he has to say about me. I'm not sure that I can handle it, in all honesty. Leaving Minneapolis police the way that we had to leave, it was an unhealthy environment to continue to function in as a human being for me. So I didn't leave willingly. This is all I've ever wanted to do. I've loved it. I loved it for 21 years. But I knew that my mental health, my family, my life depended on getting the help that I needed. And I was not in a position to be helping other people or being their rock when they were in crisis and they called the police. which is why I started this duty disability process in the first place. Other people that were seeing other doctors through the IPE process were getting approved far faster. They were getting notified far faster. It's hard to not compare their timeline to mine. I have now waited 5 weeks since the IPE was done. And the only communication I've had is with one person in para that was willing to email me back and forth. Now at this point, the things that I would change through the para process would definitely be not using Dr. Gratzer. But on top of that, having a timeline of how long this is going to take. There's some people that they leave the department and they don't get a paycheck. So if this goes on for 7 months to a year and a half, that's no money. It's zero money for these people. So that financial burden on top of the mental health burden that you're already carrying, on top of beating yourself up, not knowing if you're going to get denied, not knowing what the next step is, you can't get a job. Like you're basically holding your breath for 7 months and imagining the worst, hoping for the best, and you have no idea. Your fate is 100% in someone else's hands. I don't really know where to go from here. I think I've, for the most part, summarized how traumatic the experience was. I know that in preparation for this meeting, I did talk to a few other people, and they've expressed the same thing. It's like you start through this process and you want to get help and you want to get better, and then you end up just going back to square one, starting fresh, starting therapy again. Therapy is not free. It's out-of-pocket expenses to get the help that you need. And then the process continues on and on and on and on and on. And at some point, I know that I will get a letter, and I know that through email only, I was told last week that I was approved through the process. So I'm still waiting for the approval letter to come through the mail. But in the meantime, this has been the hardest 7 months of my life. And I just feel like there's got to be a way to make it less traumatic to leave and to separate and to apply for duty disability.
Thank you, Officer Heron. Again, I can't imagine what you both have gone through. So, but thank you for your time, your testimony on this. If there's questions, I think we'll wait. We have one more, Ms. Beth Jordan.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm afraid I'm not as well prepared as the other two. I found out about this late last night and had to move some of my clients around in order to be able to be here.
Could you please state your name for the record, please?
I'm Beth Jordan. I'm master's level therapist, dual license, both LPCC and LADC. I've been doing this for almost a dozen years. Prior to that, I was a career police officer and EMT. My EMT license ran close to 25 years, and my police license was 22 years. And my career ended not because of PTSD, but an off-duty car accident. I was rear-ended, and that was the end of that. I spent a lot of time during my career working in things like the CISM teams, doing critical incident debriefings and working with officers who had been psychologically injured by things that they had seen or done on duty, or injuries that they had received on duty. So this all started for me quite a long time ago. In my capacity now, all of my clients are first responders, corrections, dispatch, or military vets. I myself come from a military family as well. I have seen a huge change in how things have gone over the more than 10 years I'm doing this. I'd like to give you a little bit of history on some of it so that you can understand where some of the concerns are coming from. Prior to the current way that we do things, which is if an officer is going to leave, they usually put in for FMLA in order to get therapy to see if we can get them back to work. If that's not working, they start the process to get out. Most of the time that means they are going to file the injury, first report of injury on duty, and it would go to work comp. 10, 12 years ago, the standard procedure was officers would file with work comp, and if it was PTSD, they would be denied, and it would be dragged out and dragged out and dragged out, usually for months, if not a year or more. And those officers oftentimes ended up losing everything financially speaking. And I still see some officers who are bankrupted by that process. Because of that, the new process is to get them out entirely with a duty disability so they have some financial stability, because the work comp process has been dragged out even longer and has become more aggressive towards the officers and is led by psychologists who have made public statements that police officers cannot get PTSD because they choose to do the job. My concern at this point is that the same psychologists who work for the work comp industry are now working as your dragon keepers at the door, including Dr. Gretzer. This is somebody who has had complaints filed against them in the past from doing work comp IPEs. I know one of my clients filed a complaint because when she met with him, he didn't have an office available, so they met in a massage room, and it made her horribly uncomfortable. I have since found out that's a regular occurrence with him, and it even makes the male officers very uncomfortable. There are times that he brings in another person, refuses to identify who they are or why they are there, and then that person also starts questioning the officers about things. He has made very disparaging remarks about some of my officers and their families. Recently, he went after one and started demanding to know if her PTSD came from being abandoned by her mother because her mother didn't get custody when her parents divorced when she was a child. Anything that would have come out of that would have shown up in the pre-hiring screening and psychological evaluation that all officers in the state of Minnesota get before they begin work. We do a full psych eval, and we are looking for, in particular, things like PTSD. I do not do them because I am at the master's level. The people who do them, there are a wide variety of psychologists who will do them, and they are all looking for things like major depressive disorder, PTSD, high levels of anxiety, any other warning signs that this would be an unhealthy environment that they are not going to be able to function in. We also need people who are going to buck up and hit the ground running when we put them into a dynamic situation. And part of the ability to do that comes from being able to be trained up to a level of hypervigilance and a level of shutting down the emotional aspects of things, because when the emotional part of your brain takes over, it overrides the rational frontal lobe, and you don't make as good of decisions. We try to train officers to stay in that frontal lobe where they can make a neutral, sensible decision. When you go to a traumatic event, there are 3 reasons why it can become a trauma that could lead to PTSD to you personally. One is a prolonged exposure. So officers, I've got officers who've had to sit with dead children for 6 hours waiting for the crime lab to get there. So they're just alone in a room with a dead kid who's, maybe their brain is exposed or they're bleeding or whatever for 6 hours all by themselves. One reason would be if it's sudden and unexpected change. So you get a call that's one thing, and when you get there, you find out it's something drastically different. Like that party call that you're expecting teenagers at turns out to be a young couple who just found their kid floating in the pool and they're screaming for help. Okay, you handle those things very differently. That sort of unexpected, oh shoot, now I've got to change tactics and where's all my gear because I bring it with me. All of that stuff ends up leading to a sense of failure for not having been prepared for what the call was, not what the call they were given was. And the third is if it's too close to home. And I know officers who literally are so focused on work, they don't recognize an address until they pull up outside the house fire and realize it's their own house. I know that officer. That's a real case. Officers who respond to a car accident and they think that it's a family member's car because it's the same make, model, and color. And in that moment, they think it's their family member's car, and then they see that there's a bumper sticker. No, that's not my brother's car. In those moments where it's an oh shoot, it's a sudden unexpected, it's a prolonged exposure, it's too close to home, your brain takes a snapshot and you go into fight or flight. And your brain is not designed to function other than for survival purposes in fight or flight. These are people who have been trained to override that and continue to function at an extremely high level in order to complete their job while they are in fight or flight. And that means their brain shuts down and does not process a lot of the information that is not necessary in that moment for survival or their function. That's the stuff that leads to it being an ongoing unprocessed event in their brain. And the unconscious, subconscious parts of their brain continue to think that those events are still going on today. And when something is too close to that snapshot that the brain took, oh, look, there's that car again. Oh, look, this is unexpected. Anything in that snapshot can be a trigger back to those calls. I do not personally know a single officer, even the ones that don't have diagnosed PTSD, that do not have ties back to at least a dozen calls that they don't forget. Most of my clients can give me absolute details. They read it off to me as if they're reading a report, and there is no emotional effect at all because they have to shut that down so completely. And I have some clients who have no emotions and their families have abandoned them because they think that their police officer is now such an asshole that they can't deal with them anymore. And what it is they've shut down so completely, they can't feel anything anymore. And these people are being put through a grinder with this whole process. One of my clients asked me to use him as an example, and he didn't even see Dr. Gretzer. He filed his paperwork 129 days ago. His FMLA is exhausted. His paid time off is exhausted. He has to continually ask his agency, which is not Minneapolis, for additional unpaid time off. He has run out of the time that they are allowed to continue his health care. He cannot afford COBRA health care because he is not getting paid. He does not get short-term disability, long-term disability. He's not been accepted as a work comp case, and para has not gotten their butts moving on this. So now he and his son have no health care. I am now seeing him for therapy on the hopes that this will be corrected, or I can file a motion to intervene in order to be paid to give him continued care. Otherwise, he's out in the cold, because if I can't see him, nobody's going to take him without insurance. Okay. And he's not going to be able to pay the kind of costs that other therapists are going to charge who don't deal with this kind of thing. I constantly get complaints about IPEs, whether it's these new para ones, whether it's the ones for work comp. They are very, very triggering, because while these psychiatrists and psychologists are saying, oh, we're just going to go over some general stuff, it's almost like they make a point of trying to set off these clients to see things like, one is well known for slamming a door to see if the clients jump. And then he says, you do or don't have PTSD based on that. And again, my concern is Dr. Gretzer is one of the people who does work comp IPEs. And he and his coworkers and some of the other people have expressed a very strong opinion that police officers can't get PTSD. So they're already biased. It makes me wonder quite a bit why we are having them work in a dual relationship, which is unethical to begin with, where they are working both the work comp side and the para side, when they know full well the reason these officers are going through the para process is to protect them from financial ruin, and it will end their careers regardless. And this is a huge, huge strain on these people. These people have taken their jobs in order to be champions of their community, not warriors, not fighters. They're not out there intentionally harming people. They really have gone into this line of work to help. And over time, that starts to degrade because they do not get support. And that has sped up over time. I started back in the 80s and we made jokes about, the community doesn't support us today. We wrote too many tickets. And now it's to the point where most of my officers vomit before they go to work. They're so anxious. None of them want to be on medication. And most of my clients will come in and they'll say, please don't give me medication. I can't. I'm not a prescribing physician. And I will do everything possible to give them tools to minimize their medication because they don't want to be on it. If they're on it, people like Dr. Gretzer say it's the wrong medication or they shouldn't be taking it, or this just proves it's something else. If they're not on medication, it's, oh, well, you're not on medication, you don't have PTSD. These are not the ways that we diagnose PTSD. Not at all. And even at the master's level, I am allowed to diagnose. I don't do psych evals, but I'm allowed to diagnose. Dr. Gretzer and his ilk continually put in their reports that the therapists are misdiagnosing or not capable of diagnosing or have not been through any training. I'm dual licensed, both addictions and mental health. LPCC is a clinical counseling, not family and therapy. I have a lot of training in PTSD from my years working on the CISM teams. I also have training in things like sleep disorders, suicide prevention. I'm a suicide prevention specialist because suicide rates in first responders are astronomically high compared to the regular population. Those numbers are also going up. Recently, the numbers in firefighter suicides have gone up above the rate of police officer suicides. And when police officers commit suicide, it's because they do not feel effective as human beings anymore. They don't feel that they can bring anything to the table, and their being here anymore is not helping. And they feel very, very isolated because it is a very closed system. And the act of being a first responder of any kind, or corrections, or dispatch, means that you're working shifts, you're working nights and weekends, you don't get to go to your friend's birthday party, you don't get to be home on Christmas, you miss your kids' softball games, you give up all the things that make you happy and healthy and resilient in order to do 12-hour shifts to people who don't want to see you because you don't get invited to the birthday party, you get invited to the domestic after the birthday party. Nobody wants to see these people show up. It means something bad has happened. They know not to take that personally. But unfortunately, a lot of people who are making decisions do not understand this, and they don't understand the toll that compassion fatigue and vicarious loss play in all of this as well, because that's inherent with the job. And no, there is no way to teach this going through the Skills Academy to prepare people for it. It's sort of like you don't know what a death scene smells like until you've walked into a death scene. You can see them on TV or in pictures or something, but you do not get that full effect until you walk in and realize what the whole context is. And when we've got people like Dr. Gretzer who are seemingly intentionally poking these people with a sharp stick until they blow up, and treating them like suspects or asking them about things that clearly have no input about their PTSD. He told one of my clients that he's been hired to look into their background. I'd like to know if that is actually what he has been hired to do and why. Because their background pre-employment has nothing to do with the PTSD if that happens.
Yeah. What was that? There's one. Yeah.
Gordon, we're gonna have to wrap.
Yeah, no, she's in there.
Heron? Officer Heron, can you mute, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Whenever you want to go down, I just want to let you know.
Officer Heron? Yeah, there you go. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jordan. We are probably going to have to wrap up, but my apologies for that.
Well, not a problem. I hope you can understand that the two officers who just testified I think they did a brilliant job considering what they have to put themselves through to be here, and the fact that they are willing to have their faces and their names out there, because right now that's not a safe place for most people to be. I run PTSD groups for my first responders, and they're not even comfortable coming to those because 3 other people might see them. I mean, it's got them at a very big disadvantage, and then not having any idea of the timeline, not having first any kind of healthcare, sometimes for months until these things get worked out. And part of it, which I don't know if you are aware of, but the work comp side was trying to force officers who were going through work comp for PTSD to go for IPEs without having been accepted as work comp cases. That went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and they were told, no, you cannot do that. And now they have access to all that same information by doing psych evals for para. So I'm a little concerned about how all this looks and the lack of transparency. And I cannot call and ask any questions of anybody because I'm just some random therapist. Nobody will talk to me. Nobody will take my calls. Not at para, not at MMRO, not at the league, not at work comp agencies, none of them, not even the police agencies. I'm a non-entity as far as this all goes. So I can't get answers. The client's attorneys cannot get answers. The clients are being told, we cannot talk to you about your own case. Really? Could I please see the statute that says that? I have a lot of questions about the transparency here.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jordan. I certainly have a lot of questions, and I know we will continue this conversation. I'm not sure if anybody has a burning question at this point, Senator Friends.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Jordan, Officer Stewart, Officer Heron. Thanks to all of you. I just want to say a couple things, Madam Chair, and I know we're running long, but this is one of the most memorable hearings I've had in all my years in the Senate. Officer Stewart, Officer Heron, you did bring something to the table. You brought your story, and now all of us know your story, and we're going to take that story and we're going to share it, and we're going to not only show you respect, but all the officers that are similarly situated. So I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here in the Senate. I can't resist pointing out that most of the senators on this call, and I believe many of the representatives, voted for the PTSD amendment in 2018 on workers' comp. And Ms. Jordan, we should talk offline about ways to improve that. But you are respected and appreciated, and it is not a perfect system, but you have brought legitimate points to the committee today, and we will not forget it. As a lawyer who's put in 33 years working with the people who are victims of these independent medical examinations and IPE, Ms. Jordan, I am the lawyer calling the client, telling them they have to go through one of these appointments. And my frustration just about boiled over about a half an hour ago. And so since this is a hearing about paradisability, I just want to say, Ms. Strenge and Mr. Anderson, what happens in the IME world is that you find a doctor assigned that maybe isn't so impartial. The point of the IME system is to allow a second opinion, but what we see time and time again, since I got my license in the late 80s, is doctors who do not appear to me to bring an unbiased perspective and are not there to help the person who's affected, but are there for a different reason. And I would just encourage Ms. Strenge and Mr. Anderson to talk to MMRO and share what's been said here today, and just say, we don't have to dispute the right for an independent opinion, but we need it to be independent or it will be inherently unfair. And I think we can deliver that message and still show respect for all the para participants, retirees. As for the delay part, it's impossible for us on the Pension Commission to know how much of the delay could have been avoided and how much is due to the surge in applications and how much is due to COVID. But I think it'd be easy for you to share with the people at MMRO what the human cost is of those delays, because we've got 2 officers right here telling us about it, and there will be no more way for any of us to deny the real human cost of the delays. And any ways we can speed things up probably be greatly appreciated. I note, Mr. Anderson, the 97% approval rate, but we have a saying, justice delayed is justice denied. So anything that we can do as a commission to help, please let us know. Sorry, Madam Chair, and thanks, members.
Thank you, Senator Franson. Very well said. Very well said. And it's great to have your expertise about this. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for taking the time. Officer Stewart is a constituent of mine. I think most of you know that. And he's actually a very private person. So for him to come in this evening to tell his story was very important, I think, not only for us to hear. Obviously, my concerns, I've talked with him, I've heard the stories. I have his full connection to his physical or his record, psychological record that he turned over to me. But this is an eye-opener. And I think I agree with Senator French. This is the most emotional testimony that I've had since I've been here in 5 years. It's an eye-opener. It is to me. I know it is to the rest of you by watching you on the committee meeting. My concern is we have one doctor, be it good or be it bad, is making the determination of the police officer's future, its life, and it is terrifying me to listen to stories tonight of some of the instances in there. So we need to do something to take care of these officers. I had discussions with another officer, unrelated to Mr. Stewart, about the kind of the way they feel as an officer on the force in Minneapolis. This was another Minneapolis police officer, and he actually brought it down to a discussion of, they felt that, and I'll say the leadership somewhere in the city, I won't say where, almost felt it was better for an officer to get shot than a citizen, because it would be less PR issues for them. That is wrong. That is a wrong attitude. And we need to bring this to the surface so people know these stories and we can make change so that this does not ever happen again, and make sure that what's going on right now can be corrected. So thank you again for your extra time this evening. I think it's time well spent, and only a partial tiny bit of what's compared to these two officers who testified again. So again, I want to thank Officer Stewart, Officer Herron, and Dr. Jordan for testifying tonight, and all the members for listening to these stories on this evening. So thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Rosen, for bringing this meeting to us tonight so that people could hear these stories.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski. Representative Nelson, and then Senator Howe.
I think Representative Hall was first, or Senator Hall was first, but I just wanted to say listening to this sounds eerily similar to people I know that have applied for Social Security disability. Some people with medical conditions. One individual I know that had MS and is no longer able to work, and the hoops that they had to go through getting a lawyer. It sounds a lot similar to this, and this should never happen. It should never be this way. So that I'll let Representative or Senator Howe.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Senator Howe.
Thank you, and I'm going to be short. This just reminds me so much of the struggles that my fellow soldiers and I went through at the VA. It just resonates with some of the similar problems, and so I just want to tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We will get through this, but I know it falls on deaf ears. It's not what you want to hear right now, but we need to fix this because the VA went through the same type of struggles, and it's just wrong. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Howe. Mr. Anderson and Ms. Stringy, I'm sure I'm going to ask the question that everybody is thinking. Oh, we'll go to Senator Senjum first, please. Senator Senjum, you are on mute. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be very brief. I think we're all struck with the stories that we've heard, and also we're wondering a little bit about where we take this. But I, as one member of the pension committee, would like to see this go somewhere. I mean, I heard some things tonight that are, and we all did, that are absolutely wrong, that need correction, and hopefully we won't need to solve it tonight. And I also wonder how many other Minneapolis police officers are in the same situation here tonight. Some which maybe perhaps haven't even reported through any kind of a system at this point that they're suffering themselves. So Madam Chair, just I don't know how we do it, but we probably don't necessarily do it at a committee meeting, but I think there's some things here that need to be taken care of and done differently for the good of a lot of good people. And we heard We heard from 3 of them tonight. So, so let's just make a commitment to work on this and make it better because it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator St. Jim, and I think we could all agree to that. But I do have a question for Mr. Anderson and Ms. Stringy that I think everyone is thinking is Dr. Gratzer still doing evaluations? And if you're not comfortable answering that, that's certainly your prerogative. But I would like an answer maybe offline if you're not comfortable.
Madam Chair, I could address that, yes, he currely is. Like to know that this is, would like to first thank the testifiers tonight for the information as well as those who provided the personal impact statements. This is a lot of new information for us. We have not been presented with this kind of detail or really any kind of detail about Mr. Gratzer and his experience with the members. So this is a lot of information for us to hear tonight and to follow up on. So, you know, we certainly will want to get back to the commission. We'll discuss this with with MMRO about where we proceed from here. It's a lot of new information for us to take in tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. 2 out of the 4 anonymous testimony do reference Dr. Gratzer. So apparently this is a reoccurring problem. And I do think we do need to follow up and see what we can do to help you with this problem. And in turn, help our officers going forward. So it was an amazing hearing. I really appreciate your time, members. Mr. Anderson and Ms. Stringy, do you have any final comments?
No final comments here, Madam Chair.
Ms. Stringy?
No, other than we, again, appreciate hearing the testifiers. And as Doug indicated, this is a lot of new information that we'll be working through.
Okay. Well, we look forward to hearing what transpires because of this hearing. Officer Stewart, Officer Heron, thank you very much for your service, for your testimony, for your time. And I hope you heal and whatever we can do to help you. And Ms. Jordan, thank you very much. That was a very fascinating testimony on your part. So very informative too. And members, thank you for your time and diligence on this issue. We have another hearing next week, and we are going to start with Senator Pappas' secure choice. We'll have testifier speakers, but it's informational only, correct, Senator Pappas? Yep. And then we're going to do the COLA study approval. And Senator France came to me with some questions today. Need to get some answers on that. We'll get some answers. A couple private bills. So we got the para administrative bill. And there is a comment says, where are the jackets? Does anybody have the jackets? Are they still at the revisers or where are those?
They disappeared, Senator.
Yeah, that's just great. And then we have the St. Paul teachers contribution rate change and administrative change. And Senator Pappas is the chief on that. So with that, members, again, thank you very much. The Pension Commission is adjourned.